Welcome to the introductory video for A Very British Civil War, the mega game, where we're looking at the military side of the game. There should be enough information here to enable even a novice wargamer to carry out effective tactics and win victories, but also enough for more experienced gamers to get their teeth into. One key difference for the military players compared to the political players is you could be active in both the first and second phase of each turn. The political players are busy at the tables in the first phase, but then have time to move around. Please make sure that you balance your time, because if you are constantly at the table you won't have time to liaise effectively with your senior commanders. A key thing to bear in mind for commanders is that even though there is a civil war, life goes on in Britain and people do not want to see undue disruption. At this point, a large part of the population is not actually too worried about the aims of your faction. They're more concerned about putting food on the table. So you have to avoid carrying out activities that impact too much on everyday life. When it comes to moving units of troops on road, it's fairly straightforward. There are no terrain effects to worry about. You just have to make sure you pay for your petrol. When it comes to movement off-road, the only units to do so are non-motorised. Whilst tanks might spend some time moving off-road, their support units do need to travel with them, so they will need to use roads. The north of England is covered in railway lines at this point in time, and if you want to get somewhere by rail, it should be possible as long as you can find an unopposed route. The key thing here is to make sure that you buy your train tickets from the train controller. He will be wearing a top hat and a tailcoat, so he'll be very visible. The key thing to bear in mind about canals is that they are very slow, but they are cheap compared to the railways, and they can carry a lot of resources, particularly ammunition. It is worthwhile though making sure that you guard barge convoys of ammunition, because otherwise people may attempt to intercept them or just cause disruption and sabotage. The golden rules here are specifically for the fighting of battles. Key thing to bear in mind is that you must make sure your military commanders are where they need to be. You will be represented by a small painted figure which will be on the main map. If you are with troops on the main map, then you can go to the battle board with them and you can play your tactics cards. Troops without a commander figure with them may only use military resources such as artillery or air support. Here we have some sample socialist units, armour, infantry and a support unit. Their effectiveness, both in attack and defence, is along the bottom, and the red flag signifies that they are socialist units. If you're not too sure about the meaning of words like battalion, company, troop, platoon, etc., don't worry too much. The key thing that you need to bear in mind are those factors down at the bottom. Keep in mind how many steps your units have got. A large unit might still only have a small number of steps, and if a unit runs out of steps to cross off, that unit is destroyed. A good example here is the Barnsley Tykes. Having taken a large number of casualties, it doesn't mean that half of them are dead, but the unit is only fighting at 50% effectiveness. Probably is worthwhile pulling them back, because replacement units will be few and far between. Now, several unit types do have special abilities. This is partly to give a bit of flavour and also allow you to make some additional tactical decisions, often at the start or the end of a battle. Most regular infantry units don't have these, but sometimes, as in the case of the Guards infantry, they can benefit from these special abilities. The battle boards will all be single sheet boards, and they're all going to be placed adjacent to one another to make it easier for military umpires to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing and isn't coming into any difficulties. As you can see, the maximum width of any battle is 5 combats, which would be 5 units in the front line, plus support and cards. just worth the note here that any of the units in support behind the front line normally give a support bonus of +2 in combat. This is not in addition to their own factor, whether attack or defense. It's a simple +2 regardless of unit type. The only exception is support companies. The Socialist here using to lead with an infantry unit because their assault columns are particularly good in attack, maybe not so great in defence, so it's worthwhile making use whilst they're at full strength. This is the Royalist response, and by putting an armoured car unit with that recce ability, they're now forcing the Socialist to start laying 3 units in succession themselves, which gives the Royalists the opportunity to see what's in front of them before they start allocating their units. As we can see, the Royalists not done too badly spreading their units evenly, but the Socialists do have a slight advantage in one of the combats with 2 units against 1. Both sides have a small box labelled reserves. It is worthwhile, if you have the opportunity, to keep a unit, at least 1, in reserve, because it may give you opportunities in the future. Here you can see the Royalist military tactics and resource cards, which will be played face down behind the combat they will affect. The vast majority of cards only affect the individual combat that you're involved in. Now, the attack on this town is obviously very important to the Socialists. They're willing to use a heavy bombardment and take the political consequences. However, if the military commander is clever, he will have spoken to the political officer on his side, who is probably, hopefully at least, spending political capital to try and counteract the negative consequences of the use of artillery. Here you can see the combat that's about to take place, the initial one. The 2 frontline units are the Barnsley Tykes and the 1721st Lancers recce unit. They are likely to be the ones which take the casualties first. If there's a significant victory, then other units may be affected. Now, these aren't great dice rolls, it has to be said, but because Barnsley troops have made use of a support company and the heavy artillery, it's still possibly crucial in this particular instance. It could have been so different for the Royalists with a decent dice roll. But because their military tactics card didn't give them a combat modifier, it's probably not really enough in defence to achieve what they wanted. A quick look at the combat results table. It's fairly straightforward, and you check the result of each combat after you conclude that combat before you move on to the next one. The winner of the combat chooses the next combat. If it's a draw, the attacker has the initiative and can choose the next one. Here the Royalists are suffering the consequences of putting their armoured cars out in front. A loss of 2 steps does significant damage to them, but the sole consolation is the fact that the Cheshire Regiment did manage to inflict heavy casualties on the Barnsley Tykes, and I suspect they'll need to be replaced before the next attack. Here we can see a faction-specific card, particularly relating to the Socialists, and very disappointing for the Socialists because they were hoping to attack 2 units against 1, and it looks like now it'll just be 1-on-1. Now, without the infantry support, the Soviet tanks are unable to dig the Lancers out of their positions, and the battle settles down to stalemate. I suspect the Soviet Commissar will be having words with the People's Republic after this one. I suspect the Socialists have bitten off more than they can chew here. Not only do the anti-tank guns provide an effective bonus against the armour, but also there's a support company there behind the Cheshires which will provide that +4, which could be crucial. And so it transpires. A success for the Royalists counterbalances the opening Socialist success for an overall result of a draw in this battle. Both units will be staying in place. In the next phase, any units within 2 hexes may join this battle as a free move. So this one may well continue. Now, one of the key differences here in terms of battle results for the overall big picture is it does allow for the opportunity of a counterattack or a breakthrough attempt. They are conditional on having reserves. In the case of breakthrough, you must have tanks in the front line. Counterattack and breakthrough attempts are fairly straightforward, and you'll only have to check for one or the other. And there we have it. A fairly straightforward system which should follow through logically and quickly. The aim is to be able to play battles of up to brigade strength in around 5 or 6 minutes, and once units are familiar with their cards and units, it possibly even quicker.